Here we are. Hello, Rachel. Hi.
Oh, how's it going?
It is going. It is absolutely going. Yeah, it's a kind of a like a cloudy Saturday over here, and I'm honestly here for it. I'm loving I am loving it. I'm really settling into like late fall, the Halloween, all of the spookiest vibes are like firing right now. Which is good. But things are all over okay. All good over there.
Yeah, we've had like a nice like misty time over here, so I feel like that the weather's caught on that is also spooky season.
See, like I'm glad we're catching it at like peak. If this was too early or too late, we'd all be sad. But now we're just scared,
Yeah.
which is good. That's where we want to be. Well, for folks that are like joining now, we're going to be having a nice like discussion over the next hour, where we're going to talk with our collaborator Rachel Ford about their art and also show off some pieces from Molly House. Which I'm really looking forward to. And we'll kind of jump into some questions soon. But I want to use this moment to say if at any point in time you have a question, please write it in the comments. Share with us. I'd love to hear from folks. This is like, I feel like we often invite, like, share a certain ethos of putting the entire creative work out for people to talk about and engage with us during like a campaign or whatever it might be. And we're extending that same, let's say, privilege to you, Rachel, where you're constantly going to have to talk about your art with this project. But it's fun. It makes, we certainly like engaging with folks about the creative pursuit a lot. Um, yeah, let's jump right into it. So first thing, could you tell folks a little bit about yourself and where you're based out of and where you're from?
Yeah, of course. So I do so I went to sorry, I'm all jumbled. Yeah, originally I've always been like very interested in art from like young age. Literally all I could imagine doing. And then ended up doing illustration as a degree in Cardiff, and I had an amazing time working there. Like a lovely city, like really inspiring and stuff. And then since graduating, I've lived in Bristol. I've lived in like Birmingham and stuff. So very much like UK based, and yeah, been luckily like working on like little projects here and there. And main thing I've been working on since graduating has been like mainly like tarot and that kind of stuff. So well, on my final year of uni, I worked on like this tarot project called the Tarot Famous Witches, where it's all about like these famous witches, either throughout like history or like throughout fiction, that kind of stuff. And yeah, kind of went all like head in for a little bit. It was like all I was thinking about. So
I'm
yeah, I
gonna,
like
I'm actually, I'm even gonna use this moment to show. Look, I'm gonna use all my buttons. Look at like it's amazing. This tarot project is so cool. Um, and know that like this was yeah, I really like your work on this. You did pretty amazing stuff. um
thank you.
um but yeah, also I didn't realize there was time in Birmingham. That's Cole and I were just over there for the UK Games Expo, which is out of there every year. Exciting and overwhelming in its own right.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, like I'm from North Birmingham, which a bit different to South Birmingham as living. And usually, like growing up, like there's such a divide between North and South. It's like I know that there's still stuff I haven't found in Birmingham. It's huge, but yeah,
Well, that makes me wonder about like what it was like for you, like in your experience with games. Like, have you been interested in games for a long time? Is this a newer interest? Yeah, I'm curious about your intersection of art and games.
So I always, I think I started playing D&D with friends probably when I was about like 16 or so. Like I remember some of the first things they had was like drawing my D&D characters and that kind of stuff. Like I'm quite glad those sketches have been lost to time. They were not great. It was like very like I remember at the time as well, like I couldn't even think of a name for my characters. So they were just known as like the Fire Wizard for years. But
Great.
yeah, it was
Mm-hmm.
always like mainly like the more like D&D side of things that I was really interested in. Um Kind of grew up playing like standard games. I remember my dad and brother always used to play this game called like Escape to Cold It, which was my main experience of like board games for a really long time, and I was like, that's not for me. But luckily, as I got older, like I found more and more, which I was kind of like a lot more interested in. And then when I got to uni, some of my like housemates were doing like game design and that kind of stuff. So definitely, I saw a lot more and like saw like the a lot more like potential for like board games and saw like a lot more like indie ones and that kind of stuff. So and I think before that, my main instance was like tarot, as I said, but like tarot, I feel like can almost be seen as like similar art that people would use in games and things. So yeah, I think it's a bunch of stuff which kind of like all came together with this project for sure.
Yeah, and tarot especially has the some of the like the situationality that is, you know, setting up space, just like setting aside time to then do the thing. And
Yeah.
so much of like games as intentional objects also feels like these like moments of reflection that tarot has too. And also your experience with tarot and making like specifically card based physical art is
Mm.
so like it feels like so different than folks that are doing a lot of digital art now because of the restrictions and limitations and the things that work really well and fit like knowing that you had that anyone that has worked already like doing card art um, is already like it's a different skill set, it's a different framework for thinking about your own like a vision or artistic pursuit
Yeah.
in that too.
So
Um,
I
yeah.
think sometimes those limitations can be like quite useful because it kind of gives you like a good path to work down for it for sure. Like I remember when I first started doing the research of like, because I knew I wanted to make like a tarot deck. I found it like fascinating and like like I don't know the breadth of it, like how much art you can create for it is incredible. So I kind of got like a bit overwhelmed by it at the start, but then I think those limitations kind of like, as I say, like help you see like not get too overwhelmed with like all the possibilities. And then I was like fascinated by there's like obviously like one of the most famous texts is Pamela Coleman Smith's, and I found the way that she told her narrative through her illustrations was like fascinating, and I realized the main thing like I loved about tarot was like the kind of story you could tell with it and like the people as well. So when I decided to go down like the route of doing it about like famous witches, it was kind of I think the main struggle was choosing which would represent which card the best. So then it was interesting to like yeah, kind of put one as like a certain archetype and stuff and see what resonated with like the specific witch's story, which would correlate with a card. So
Right,
yeah.
and that like that narrative work could be so powerful to help people like
Mm.
understand those stories more. We're actually in a for the folks that are like really tied to the current Molly House build. um we're actually going to be doing like a big thematic overhaul of this sort of flavor text and like that is and specific of the Molly characters being tied to what particular suit. And there is without a doubt some like tarot inspiration all over Molly House. Go figure. In part because like the suits, the minor arcana like carry like resonances in some different, you know, in some different thematic registers that can like really strengthen some of the stories and some of the play elements in Molly House, and really like revealing um, and like engaging ways. I specifically think of some of the stories of like Miss Kitten, of of some of the Mollies that were like thieves or a bit roguish,
Mm.
that blackmailed and like thinking about what sort of how should that archetype or that suit ideology like fit with that historical figure, to like kind of strengthen that narrative or for make it to make the mechanics of the game emerge more. So these like intersections of arcana, or not arcana, but of like the narrative work that's done in the making of card decks is, I don't know, exciting. It's also complicated. They're kind of complicated questions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of artistry that goes into it. So actually, this I wanted to push the conversation a little further, so I'm not so prattling on. Like you'll have to say, Drew,
Yeah.
just stop talking.
Honestly, I could talk about Taranaka stuff for, I could just prattle on for ages as well. I feel that.
um, so specifically with in the board game world, in the RPG world, you have been doing stuff in for like some other game companies before too. So I just wanted to speak a little bit to some other projects that you've done. Where did you first start entering like games, or yeah, anyway, speak to that.
Yes. So I've been working with this company called Bound, who create like these whole worlds essentially like that you can use for any RPG tabletop, and they create like these little like packets of like lore and that kind of stuff that you can use. So I've been doing some character designs for them, which I know it's been so much fun. Like they've got such like amazing storytelling and like world building, so it's so much fun being able to work for those. And it feels strange because that's something I used to do like for fun as like a teenager, and now I get to do it as a job. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was been working for them for quite a while, and I've also been we've just now also been working on like a video game as well, which is a very different way of working. Like it was a big I know learning curve for sure. But yeah, that's called Project Diagnosis, which is this kind of sci-fi visual novel style game, which it's all about you're like this doctor who's researching these patients that have come in that have been abducted by aliens, and so it's like going from like sci-fi to kind of like fantasy. It's quite fun, like between the two.
And then we're having you navigate like 18th century
Yeah.
like historical work too. So you're just getting really like capable of handling a lot of different parts of your brain all at the same time.
Yeah, I just got my fingers in many pies.
uh, that's amazing. Wow, this project sounds very different. So I'm hoping that you're liking the act of learning. Um, that's it certainly feels like there are in Colonize own like art direction pursuits of our previous projects. There are certainly parts of the graphics and of the illustration work that we've really found to quite enjoy and to like double down on. Oh, this was like I'm looking forward to doing this X, Y, or Z,
Yeah.
for some of the specific graphic parts of the project, and other things where we realized that we are not great at 3D, and that's just something that we're going to live with for now.
I know there's one thing like I loved about this project is, or like any project like this, has been able to do like a deep dive into like the history of it and learning about like the art from that time. Like that's why I think Molly House is so interesting, because like specifically for like LGBT history, a lot of it is not recorded, like especially from like this time. So it's so nice to have like this little um to call it, like this little capsule almost of all this information that we've got, and being able to kind of like correlate that with like art of that time. Like a lot of things that we use for references would be like Hogarth, for instance, and being able to yeah, put that with all like the court rulings and stuff that we've got. And yeah, I think just being able to just go down huge like almost like an iceberg or something like that
Yeah.
is like fascinating.
Yeah. I'm gonna pull up this some Hogarths that we've used as like source material. For those that don't know, like William Hogarth is like prolific, um, very famous illustrator and engraver, and a lot of the engravings have been really, really well preserved. Um, for us to use to make projects like this that are also like understanding a lot of the dress and the attire. And also there's so much like humor and
Mm.
cynicism in all of Hogarth. So there's like also this like style that we really think like captures the like some of the levity um
Mm.
of the period too. That's really well.
I think like so much of art from like this period that people used to be seeing are just like very stiff portraits of people just sat in like I don't want a chair or something like that. So to see something with like this much character and just feel really alive, and like I feel like he touches on subjects as well which are quite like raunchy and stuff. So it's not something you would expect to see.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, yeah, like spitting, and I think like spitting in each other's faces. That
mm,
like I think there's a pocket watch that's being stolen right here.
yeah.
Um,
Like one of my favorite things that I really wanted to include is that lady setting fire to the painting in the back. I was like, I'm gonna put her in as like a little Easter egg. I love her.
like the amount of like world burning, like world on fire,
Mm,
which is to say, I think like early on, and maybe this is a reflection of thinking about Hogarth, is really imagining. Oh, look at this little friend that's on the top of the harp too. That's great. But is imagining like that, like there's this very present moment right now that also feels like the world's on fire and everything is coming to an end, and we're in the end times, and we're setting fire to atlases, but
yeah.
all like this is 300 years old too. So there's this like this moment of like knowing that this game is coming out in next year, and then also having this like moment in history not be a stiff portrait,
Mm.
and for it to feel as relevant and kind of raucous as our days feel. Um,
But yeah, I
Also,
think there's something
that's
quite reassuring in that, like that, the world's always been on fire and we've always been fine. So who knows?
but it's another moment where like these are closer to images that we've been thinking of, like okay, so there's not that well, like there's not well preserved or images that have then survived long enough or been well documented that could document like the life of late night molly houses. But I do have like scenes of, well, like this scene, which is like, this is a scene that isn't necessarily a molly house, but you could maybe reframe it, right?
Mm,
And I can reframe a lot of these Hogarths and extend people's imagination. And that's like honestly where this work has been really exciting with you, Rachel, has been to like fill in this gap of the art that could have been in this like in the world that was not documented. Um,
yeah,
in some of these like other rooms, because while we have like court records as such primary texts and diaries, we don't have large visuals, which is one of the most unique, like out of all history games that I think have been getting published in this last year. It is certainly one of the most interesting pursuits, is trying to do some of the work of recreating a more modern story, um, with this sort of source work.
yeah. I think as well it's nice, it's like I was saying, so much of like LGBT people have been like lost to history, or like there's not that much recording of them. So it's nice to try and give them like a face, like actually have it as like a physical thing that people can look at and appreciate. And I think it like humanizes them a lot as well, like because I think it makes a big difference than just seeing like names written in, like court documents and stuff, like actually seeing them. And yeah, so I've been trying to do them justice.
Well, I won't say pressure's on. um, yeah, and I think it's not just to do them justice, but also to like to speak towards the joy with like, and that like really leans into the I think the work of the design currently, and also the art, because so much of the game is like celebrating these big parties. So not just leaning in on some of these like, well, what are some of the historic images of like late night culture, but it's also to
Yeah,
look at historical images of like of parties and of celebration and of like a freedom and play that also feel very representative of that moment that we're trying to capture, which is why I'm like this a bunch of the actors in the barn, um I can't remember when this one is, 1738. So this is really in early 18th century, which is, I love Hogarth's work because it's also so close to when the events around Mother Collapse were happening as well.
Yeah.
But to say that, like, again, raucous and loud, but also like really fundamental, like joyful and expressionistic.
Yeah, I think it really makes you crave wanting to be like a fly on the wall for one of these parties, or just go in and join them and stuff. I think that's the that's the goal.
Yeah, there's like a lot of movement,
Mm.
a lot of like movement too, which is fun. And again, so much of like working on different projects for us has been finding some different like large, like historical pieces that are well preserved, that we get to like introduce into the game. And all of our games also feature like we'll print a large um, historical piece on the inside of the box cover. And I suspect we'll do a similar thing where we put like maybe a Hogarth on the inside of the box too,
Yeah.
um, to sort of like, again, ground the players. And it's really also, it feels really nice to have an opportunity to like do some recreation and republication of like big historical art.
Yeah.
When you have paper, you should print cool stuff on it.
Yeah, for sure.
um, okay, but I think this is like, this might be a really cool moment to then. So when we've been talking about, I'm going to tab over. Let's talk about when we've been talking about like the work that is Molly House, filling in these different these different gaps. Um, you can see these different like party scenes, and one of the biggest asks was, let's let's recreate these so that they make more sense for cards, for card art.
Yeah.
um and I wanted to pull up one of your earlier sketches, and then I'll show the later final version if that's okay, um uh of the festivity scene. How does that sound?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm buying myself some time. Well, I really love like how this particular piece transformed, um, which is to say, I love our friend in the back making another world burning experience in the back. It makes me very happy. Um, but like so working with you, Rachel, you could speak to this a little bit more. It was really helpful to have you essentially do the work of blocking things out. But I'm curious about this initial composition, what the story was behind it.
So I feel like it's slightly different working for other people where like I want you to have a feel for like the whole image before um before I actually start drawing out, making sure we got the beats. Because like say if I was drawing this for myself, then I kind of got the image already in my head, so I just need to get it out on paper.
Mm-hmm.
But for this, I had to like compile references. Luckily, like you guys sent over a whole bunch of like really useful ones as well. And I like for this one specifically, I wanted to see characters from those references that I really liked, and I was like, okay, this shows the kind of thing that I think would appear in like a Molly House. Like trying to like put yourself in that scenario, like, or if you're at a party, what you see into this like there's all sorts happening. Like there's a woman trying to be sick at the front and all that kind of stuff. It's trying to find things to like humanize it a bit and have like, because I think looking for a lot of references for like say like the costumes, the dress, the furniture, architecture, and that kind of stuff, they can be quite, I know, stiff sometimes. Like specifically when you're trying to do something like as I say like characterful as this. So I think trying to find a way of not putting that stiffness into the drawing and having all that character. And I think it's like a back and forth where for a lot of it, it was just kind of a lot of little sketches, which I then put into one. So like I might have just done like a little scene of like the people at the front to start with, and then just filled out spaces being like, oh, I want someone who's just, they're just trying to play cards and all this is going on. Or like, oh, there's someone not having a good time, but they're out in the corner, so it's fine. And yeah, and then once I've got like all the characters there, I think more about like the composition. So I was like, where I want like the focus to be of this, like because depending on like what size this card will be printed at means like how much detail people really want to be seeing, like what you want to focus on. So for this, I try to keep the focus just right at the front, so you've just got the people. They're just sitting there so you can see them, and the rest, like if you want to really look at it, you can see more, but it's not overwhelming to the piece. So I kind of just try to use this grayscale of being this will be like that kind of like engraving style where we've got like all like the cross hatching and stuff. But for now, just gray it out, try and see what it'll look like, and then once we've all settled on it, then we can like go in and like start working on all the line work and stuff.
Right. Right. Now what a little bit more about process. So is
Mm.
this are you starting hand drawn? Where are you how did this even initial sketch start?
So I mainly work for sketches. I mainly work with like just an iPad. I've got Procreate, which is a very like fast program to use. Like it's very intuitive, like quite small, very portable as well, which I find good if I just want to get stuff out fast. And then sketches all sorted. Then once I want to go on and do something more refined, I can get it into a different program. But I find Procreate so useful for just keeping things like light, sketchy, so you can just get all that kind of like movement out there. So like this, and like with these brushes as well, like I've just used like a brushes that like emulate like pencil, and then I think like the one for grayscale is like a chalk brush or something like that.
Mm.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, I love that just like the amount of playfulness that's happening, and also like languish in that front piece is really good. To say that there's a lot of emotional space that that you're trying to capture,
Mm.
a lot of different personalities. I want to bring
So
up so that other folks can see the next piece. Is that does that sound good?
yeah, go
Okay.
ahead, carry on.
Um, I want to bring up this one, which is I'll just make a bunch of tabs, um, which is more along the lines of the Hogarth scale. So yeah, let's. Could you speak to the evolution of from the grayscale sketch to this?
Yeah, so I did a bunch of testing for what brushes I'd use because I know from like the Hogarth stuff is they've got some really nice like textures in there because it is like hand printed on like metal and stuff. You get a lot of like imperfections and stuff, which I really wanted to keep in it. So I think I initially tested like a much I think it's called like crispy Inca or something like that, and I was like, yeah, that's the brush for me. Then I tested it and it still looked too clean, and so they ended up using actually the same pencil brush for this one. And I start with just doing the figures. So then it's just literally the outline of the figures, got them all sorted. We have like a bit of back and forth from the sketch where we wanted to like change up a couple of figures. So did that in between the sketches. And then once I've got like that main line work down of like the figures and then just like the main like background lines of like the doors, like the curtains and that kind of stuff, then I can then consider the like kind of cross hatching in this. So for the cross hatching, I had like I was trying to think of like in terms of like the grayscale, it like how thick you want the cross hatching to be. I don't know how else
Yeah,
to describe it.
right.
It's so like the depth between like all the different lines and that kind of stuff. So for the main backgrounds, where it's that like thicker, broader lines, that'll be kind of like the light grayscale, adding that in, and then going back in with a much more like finer brush and adding like all those like fine details and stuff.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
like it's a really interesting way to like recreate the look of
mm,
an etching being pressed, because we're not doing that print work.
yeah,
And that's like a totally different skill set, and like it's an impossible task.
mm,
Maybe in the future, if this game does super well, we'll do etchings.
yeah,
But like I think you've done a really like good job of like creating that feel also,
mm,
so that this can live like amongst the other Hogarths, so they're also
yeah.
like in the same like space to that.
I think it's like a fine line as well of having it look like engraving, but also have it readable on like the size that you want it printed.
Yeah.
So like a lot of like the cross hatching I've been doing is probably a bit too like heavy-handed by Hogarth standards, but for this, because of the size you'll be seeing at, it still translates okay. And then the stuff like all the I've used a lot more like black shadow and stuff, which he would just to make it pop a bit more on the scale. Where like some of it could look like little ink pockets that you get when you were printing. So it tries to it try not have it like exactly replicate, but be of that time. I think is a I know a fun one to kind of play around with.
um Also, like, to a nut, like more notes of like iteration, which I think are is like a fun story for this particular piece, is also
Mm.
knowing that like so much of the work is not just like trying to recreate some of the scenes, but also like having a really open dialogue with Joe, um, who like made a really important note about the act of christening, the
Mm.
the moment of splashing gin in someone's face as like a joyous moment, um, but also like that isn't really entirely captured in other places, not certainly not in
Mm.
other like Hogarths, um, and getting that like in this. So it's been really fun to like curate some like specifics to the Molly community and some of the like I think the particularities that really define this early community, and getting those like into in like small ways a lot of these pieces. um, I also wanted to have a quick note, that thank you for the questions. There is going to be a mix of original art and Rachel's art in the game, but and Rachel, you know this too, and I'll share it with everyone, because the game has funded really well. I'm super happy that we're going to be able to work on more pieces for this game, and there's going to be like, Rachel, your hand, it will be all over this in terms of its like aesthetic look, which is great. We've often leaned really like heavily on historical pieces, and there's going to be a lot of that too, in part because the the intersection of your work and of bringing in Hogarth's, is a really cool space, and we're trying to use your work to bridge back into some of the really cool historical pieces, but also for folks to know that like this is still a game about history. Like, this isn't a fantastical setting, which is wild. I've
Mm.
had some like that has been some of the like playtest feedback that I've had before, where folks
Yeah.
like didn't think that this was real for a second. So I like we have to like ground them in the reality of the moment too, which is really cool.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's like fascinating hearing about like the statistics involved as well, like quite how many Molly houses there are. Like, I think that there's a video that I was watching about it that said there was equivalent of like 200 gay clubs in like a city or something like that compared to like modern day standards. It's like that's crazy to think about like the scale that they were at.
yeah, yeah, someone,
It's fascinating.
yeah, it's like, I think that the same fact that was like, it's like as many gay clubs in New York in the 70s as
Yeah, yeah,
right as there were in like in London,
yeah.
and just like to know that like this isn't a small story, is another
Mhm.
like nice reminder. Um, um, Another one that I really love that you've done is also showing like less of just like the festivities, but also getting some of the clothing. Like, I just love your hand when it comes to like fabrics. It's really great. Anyway, I love the motion in this particular one.
Yeah, I think it's fun messing with the fashion of this because there was people of like very different classes that used to come to Molly houses. So making sure that you use references that kind of portray that, where it wouldn't just be, like there'll be like different ranges of like gowns and stuff that people would wear, and it's fun working with you guys because you're so knowledgeable about all this. But like, I think one sketch I did, they'll be like, "Well, I don't think this hat would have been there in this period," and that kind of stuff. So it's been fascinating learning more about this period as well. But
I
yeah, I
mean,
think that
right?
what
We're doing our best to recreate, to do, that pursuit of recreation.
yeah, yeah. So it's fascinating learning about it. But yeah, like for instance here, like there's like robes a la Francais and that kind of stuff in there. Like I think it's fun trying to find references for. I don't know, it's just nice looking at so many gowns, trying to put there and there.
let's let's not let's not confuse the fact that it's really nice looking at all
Yeah.
the dust too. um yeah, but it's also another like interesting moment of like navigating some of the historical space,
Mm,
of knowing that like though this like in its like most isolative reductive moment feels like folks are wearing dresses, and
mm,
we want to like show how many dresses were being worn, but also there was a lot of like folks wearing male presenting like clothing that were in molly houses too, maybe folks
yeah.
that didn't even have maiden names or christened names or whatever it might be, um and to showing like the diversity of different kinds of people, and also where folks were coming from too, which is like another like great moment of the diversity of like occupation that is presented in some um of the court findings of like how diverse what feels like middle class or average the like the backgrounds for some of these people are,
Mm,
or exceptional, right, when it comes to the bandits or more larger personalities like Princess Seraphina are in the game. um but yeah, I do think that one really great lens is the costume, and I like this particular etching, and also the line work on the edges too makes it feel so much like an etching than
yeah, I think it's interesting seeing a lot of Hogarth stuff as well because I think a lot of the time the faces by modern day standards, like they don't feel like particularly gendered in any way. Like I think the way that the people like are drawn in that style, like it's like just the features are not like they're not like ultra feminine, they're not very masculine. It's just like representative of like
well, I think they're a little like almost grotesque
yeah,
in
yeah.
certain ways. This little like sorry, I just found this little buddy who's doing a hand puppet, and this friend is just amazing. But yeah, there isn't it's funny, maybe it's just like it's cynical and it's poking fun at like the ridiculousness of the time and of vice and of all these things, so maybe it's
Mm,
maybe it is like leaning into the grotesque, like his grotesque or something like this,
yeah,
but but it seems like playful, and there's so much character that like transcends gender. um
yeah, yeah, for sure.
um yeah, sorry, I this little kid was my treat yesterday. um and I think so I'm going to bring up this other one too, which I quite like. um these Another note for these, actually, before I have you dive into this one, is that these are sketches that are going to be then like brought in the game with like using paper textures and color
Mm,
gradients, and like they're going to like live in the game space really well, but it's really nice having like such clearly isolated art to have us wrap our head around like how this piece is going to get used, and for it to be the most flexible asset for us when game making. So at times I think folks might see this as like very plain because it's not living in the game with all of the graphic design supporting it as well yet. But I particularly love this composition the cruising scene. um
yeah, I think as well, like it's if you're not quite sure what where the art will be used yet, being like quite open with the composition is I don't know it's a fun one to play around with where it's um it's like for instance like around like the like outline of it as well, like we're not sure like where it will be in the game yet, so it's nice to kind of have it be like a almost like transitional piece where it can bleed into a lot as well. And
and I think this piece is also like really flexible in a lot of ways, for us, mostly because it's also doing some like style setting, when it
mm,
comes or style reinforcements of that same like crosshatch staircase of more of the same outfits and same like perspective too, which is really great. But also this is like a classic. This is maybe an archetype for us of the sort of art that doesn't exist, right? When it comes to like a Hogarth was not making like an etching of a scene of cruising, of a scene of going out. Um, Maybe in this particular way, maybe something like Gin Lane or
mm.
or Beer Alley or something like that. But this is different.
Yeah, I think this one in particular as well was quite fun to play with, like the gender of the people that would be wearing like these kind of clothes. So like I changed ever so slightly like where the cut of the trousers would be, or like what kind of shirts they might be wearing. And so it was kind of it was very fun to play around with that. Yeah, or like
Um,
how like I think some of like the trousers were like rolled up the knee at like a different height and that kind of thing. It's weird that they have such like different denotes of gender back then than we do today. So like trousers might have been like here or there back then, but yeah, it's fun little things you can do to change the perception of them.
yeah, yeah, it's really good. And also I love them the again the moment of the rose or the flower in hand. I feel like I'll tie this directly to bring up some of the sketches that we had for some of the suits. So Rachel has been again, you've been working with us in a bunch of different ways on like the look of the game, of establishing some of the core aesthetics of it. And because we're bringing these playing cards that are inspired by tarot and of traditional playing card suits that are doing some of the big thematic work of the festivities, we also wanted to like ground some of the suits in like different styles. And I really do like the ooh, maybe I'll make this just a bit smaller. For us to see a little bit here. Let's get it. Oh wow, I left a bunch of tabs open. That's okay. That's okay. Um, but I think I wanted to show off some of the variations of working with any illustrator is like participating in iteration. And it's been really fun and interesting to like find the sort of iconography that has then worked well for in game space, right? In the on the cards, and also then finding like notes that resonate really well in some of the assets. So once we decided on liking this particular heart or that one, hold on, and then I'll bring up a I'll bring up maybe this five. You can see where we landed of taking this heart that's wrapped in flowers that have more like touchstones to some of the etchings that might get seen over here too. I think some of that work is like, oh, we're doing some narrative work, aren't
Yeah.
we?
I think it's fun as well playing with like so many different like iterations of it. So like I think one thing that's hard to get in sketches is like the scale that you'll actually see the final image at. So like some were like way too ornate and wouldn't fit with the other suits as well. So it's nice having that conversation going back and forth so you can really like fine tune it and yeah, get the perfect little heart for it.
Right, right. Um, yeah, the suits have been are like a such a wonderful thing to like explore because they're doing so much thematic work. And they live in other places in the way that this fan could have been pulled out of one of our festivity scenes, like at any random corner, or one of the masquerades. um I do quite like this masquerade scene, which is amazing, which is great. And um I love the perspective that you've used on this one to bring these characters forward too.
I think this was another one where it's like a joy to be looking at so many references for this. Like the masquerade costumes that people came up with back then, like they are incredible. It was like a tough choice choosing like which ones will like make it into the illustration and which ones won't. So I think
um
definitely get some like inspiration for like my own Halloween costumes this year for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, like this person is incredible. Sorry, the looks. No, don't worry, I've been taking notes too for Halloween this year. um yeah, the with some of these like I think you've been doing a lot of like there's a lot of freedom to do a lot of character art. So it's not just environmental art, it's not just doing some like scenes or whatever it might be. And there's a lot of like a lot of space to do to have a lot of creativity for interpretation for this. So I've really appreciated the like the care in your hand to like giving so much life and diversity to a lot of the like the faces in Molly
Mm.
House. And this is to say that right now there's like only one Molly card that we're using, which is the sketch of the Serafina that we've had earlier. And we'll have like we'll eventually get to having and sitting down and having like great art for all of them, which is like really nice that this is another moment to like celebrate that Rachel we get to like work together and get to like flesh out all of the art for this project
Yeah,
over the coming months.
it's been just like an amazing opportunity of like there's so many different kinds of art to be doing. Like there's like the portraits we've been doing for like the mollies, like there's I don't know, like all the suits, like scenes, like just like the breadth and like it's just incredible to be working with.
There's well I mean there's a lot of work to do.
A
There's a
lot,
lot
yeah, a lot to go.
yeah, there's a lot of work to do still.
Yeah.
But it's really like, and that's like, so maybe I won't get too bleary eyed with talking about the campaign, but like we're so grateful that um we're able to like actually build out and bring so much unique art into this game. Um which is a relief, which is a few a few. Yeah, I'm feeling really really good about that. But also like, and I think this is another moment where I think your hand is and approach has been really cool to like also show off some of the more intense scenes in the game, like the scene of Pillory, and to show these uh the naysayers
Yeah.
at the bottom. I think this particular one is like really striking,
I,
and also incredible boots.
I think as well, like, because this is like a more intense scene, I realized trying to make those faces even a bit more almost like grotesque, as you're saying. And I think that kind of really gives like the scene, well, try to give the scene a bit more weight as well, where, it's almost like these like nightmarish little figures at the bottom. It really, yeah, puts the scene in a different light, I think.
Yeah.
But,
um yeah, and that's again that is the work that is playing Molly House also feels like you can't not include both of these, or like we would feel some sort
mm,
of injustice not having them there, or certainly that much more reason to celebrate the joy when there are such like ghastly folks at the bottom of
yeah.
this. But also, and I don't have it in front of me, that like this was another moment to pull the more historical broadsides as references. So it wasn't just Hogarth's; it was newspaper, some newspaper scans that we could also use
Yeah.
in the game as well.
I think it's been good working from like multiple different references as well. So it's you can get a feel more for like the time in general, not just like this specific artist's view at this time. So I think this is like very slightly different style to like the festivity scenes and stuff, but still very much like the same universe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like kind of keeping those consistencies with like the similar like cross hatching and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been fun playing around with all of that for sure.
Um, and I'll show. Thinking about what I want to do next. I want to show. Um, I'll show this one, and then I'll show one more. So this like as one of the like raid or arrest scenes, I also think is great. Like the style well established, and also more like more shattered glass and bottles too. Which is like also important. There's always been like a lot of gin in all of these. In every story that we've been talking about, there like has to be gin in all of them. Um, but like this is like definitely something that feels a bit like, oh, this is the newspaper, this is the etching or the quick wood block that made the
Mm.
broadside, um, and is intense.
Yeah, I think as well it's fun trying to get in as many different references as I can. Like I remember you sent over some really interesting pictures of like specific gin bottles, and I was like, okay, so we can use that kind of image to um have at like the bottom here of like even like the shape of like the bottle and what the glasses would be. And I think like tiny little details like that can add to creating like a more realistic image of that time, where it just feels like slightly more distant from like today's view of it, I think. But
Right.
yeah.
And this is like, I think this adds to like the care of these being collections of details, of collections of peculiarities, or the things that are actually foundations to what make communities, are specifics, and all adding up. And that feels like building some of these compositions together has been like helping like really share some of the like defining features of the Mali community, at least in this time. And that's also doing some of the historical restoration work. And like this is also done in like other games. And I think of like the work that it is like making a game like Obsession, or of like these big pursuits of wanting to do your best to recreate like life in a specific period. um and one way to do it is capturing vignettes like this and making sure that we can get all of the most grounding thematic details. um and so it isn't just really close portraits and faces, and we're letting all of that thematic
Yeah.
work exist in the imagination. So I really like these mid perspective shots on what it's feeling like, right? The action. um
Yeah. Yeah, I think as well, like I get quite obsessed with like all the tiny little details and intricacies with stuff like this. So it's so nice to have like a frame and a scene where you can fit all those in, like a tiny little like figure in the like in the portrait, for instance, or yeah, like a wine glass, or like trying to put like a little something on like their fan or something like that. So it's nice to have the ability to do that tiny bit of world building and stuff. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I wanted to show up another great, like I have loved getting grayscale like blockings. And that's been one of like, it's these are opportunities for me to share, like for us to share process of, to say like how these pieces like evolve over time,
Mm.
of how they kind of like grow from like blocked out sketches, and turn into like more full pieces, and eventually show people production versions of what it turns into. So
Mhm.
hoping the stream will be useful for folks later too. And I love the architecture work on this church scene already.
Well, thank you. But yeah, it's fun. It's like I said before, like it's fun working in a style of sketching where I'm not only trying to like show like the composition of it, but I'm trying to give people an idea of what the final image will look like, instead of just being like a sketch, which is like useful for myself, knowing like, oh, I've got to put this here, I've got to put this here. So yeah, it's like a fun process to be working with for sure.
I'm gonna bring it up back. I'm gonna bring it back to us. Okay, so wow, I opened a lot of things. Yeah, we've made some cool stuff together. Well, we're just starting. I'm just gonna say that again. We're things are just getting started. Um, because there's a lot of again, there's so much more to do still. But in time, I get excited about this project, and it's been nice to like see if folks were excited about it, because the excitement and enthusiasm that comes from crowdfunding like also fuels the fire of our own collaborations together, right? To
Yeah.
get us more excited about the project now that it's out in the world. We pulled back the curtain. Everyone can see the masquerade that's happening, and now you can come in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I know the amount of support, so it means like we now know how many more like possibilities we have, like how much more we can create, and yeah, it's just so much fun to see it like all together, as well as like if you've just been doing like piece after piece and then see it as like this big project that's starting to form. It's like it's incredible seeing it.
Yeah, it is certainly coming together. The I'm happy to say that uh, later today and tomorrow I'm going to be printing out another prototype. So I'll be chopping up a bunch of cards, and hopefully I won't miss any of my chops, and I won't cut your art in half, which happens in it sometimes. And I'm putting together a couple of playtesting kits, because next week, um, Cole and I are going to be bringing Molly House and a bunch of your art over to San Diego HistCon, historical gaming convention in Southern California. That is wonderful. I'm going to be running some demos of Molly House, so hopefully I'll take some pictures. I have a lot of pictures of Molly House that I should share as updates too. But I'll be taking pictures of it while it's out there. And also we'll be uh, yeah, we have a couple more conventions later this year that we're going to be taking Molly House to, and working on the art of this project as well as working on the design so that we can lock things in. And also, um, there's also some world where the solo version of the game's coming together. So there's going to be maybe some more unique um, small icons that we can talk through later too. But Rachel, thank you so much for coming together
Thank you
and
so much for having me. Yeah.
talking today. For folks that aren't following you, where can people find you online?
So I'm on Instagram as rfordjpeg. Find me on my website's rford.uk as well. Yeah, I've got many links on there, so you'll find me somewhere.
And you have
Yeah,
great JPEGs.
yeah, yeah.
It was a pleasure talking about. I don't know. It's also just nice to just look at some stuff in isolation and just see it as its own piece. Yet
Yeah, sure.
it's going to be even better seeing it in the game space later too. Which we'll maybe have a maybe we'll have to get together like later again towards when we're like closer to doing pre-production stuff. Because that sounds kind of fun. It'll be a very different thing. We'll be much hairier there. Yeah, I'll just be tired. Okay, hold on. I want to see if anyone had questions in chat that I missed. Oh, Cole, thanks for being here. Thanks for swinging by, and I'll get this posted shortly for folks to catch if you're just not popping in. But at that, I think I might wind things up. So Rachel, have an incredible Halloween. I
Rich? Oh yeah, happy
hope you
time.
get scared. I hope you watch a good like horror movie or something. There has to be something scared to get out there
Yeah.
for.
Honestly, Halloween's like my Christmas, so so this is like the peak time of year for me.
Oh, good, good. Well, many celebrations
Thank you so much.
to you and your family. Okay. And until next time, it's been great, Rachel. I'll talk to you later.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.